Now, normally I would have bolted. I would have been out of there and said, this lady's nuts, I'm leaving. But for some reason I stayed, and the only thing I can figure is that it was a God thing, that he had a plan for our lives. He had something that he wanted us to do.
But Ken wasn't interested in God at all. His entire focus was to achieve fame and fortune as a rock star, with the lifestyle that went along with it. But he says even in those days, thoughts of what he calls something more crept in.
I can remember, when all your friends are gone home, and when it's just you and you're alone laying in your bed, I can remember saying, this can't be all there is to life. There's got to be, I can't see myself being older and still doing the same thing. And so I think even at that point, God was starting to work on me.
And God was soon to become a huge part of their lives. Ken's brother was killed in a motorcycle accident, and the pastor who led the funeral helped them realize life could end at any moment.
It really made us start thinking about the reality of God. It started to make us think about the fact that we weren't indestructible, and we started to have questions about God.
He and Shelley moved back to the Maritimes to be close to family. But it was when one of the band members committed his life to God that things really began to change.
And they needed a lead guitar player at the church, and so Dave started phoning and harassing me, and I didn't want any part of it. But eventually, after him calling enough, we ended up going out and seeing this church that, I had preconceived ideas of what church was about, but it really was a fun church, and they did things differently than what I had thought. And so we just enjoyed it there and hung out and ended up, giving our lives to the Lord.
Ken and Shelley were soon married and expecting their first child. But even though they had started on a journey of faith, those first years weren't always easy.
I had a lot of baggage, and that I didn't really know that I had until God started putting his finger on this and then on that and on this other thing. So the first, few years, 3 or 4 years of our marriage were a bit rough. Some people have the preconceived idea that, once you accept the Lord or you get saved, or that everything just automatically changes and becomes this big rosy picture of, perfection. And but I think maybe it can happen for some people, but I think generally speaking it is a process.
Ken was changing too, and quickly finding a profound sense of calling.
I went and talked to my pastor, and I said, this is really weird. I've only been saved for a couple months, but I feel like God's telling me that we're going to be in ministry. And the pastor said, one thing I'll tell you about God is that if he really spoke it, it will continue to intensify. That feeling will only get stronger. And that's exactly how it's been. I mean, God has just constantly shown us, the next step and the next step and the next step, and it's gotten better and better.
The Sullivans' faith journey eventually led them here to Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia. In 2005, they launched a congregation here called Bethel Outreach Church.
God's continuing to do amazing stuff in us and through us, and opening doors for us, even having you guys come here. And to be honest, when we look at where we were to where we are today, it certainly is not a prideful thing. It's a very humbling thing. And it makes me want to weep to think that God would look upon two people who were in those circumstances and to bring them out, and now to be in the place that we are. It's an amazing thing.
12 years have passed now, and looking back, they can hardly recognize the young Shelley and Ken who met in a maritime bar.
I look back on my past, and I don't look back on it in shame anymore. I used to feel, weird about it, but I certainly, I'm worth something now. I know that because I'm, one of God's children, I'm like, there's nothing better. I'm perfect in his eyes. And that was hard for me to kind of overcome, being perfect in God's eyes, and viewing myself as how he sees me.
God has just wrecked me. I'll never be the same again. And there's absolutely nothing negative I could say, and he's turned my whole world upside down, and I'd never ever go back. Some people think about, the good old days, and remember when, I don't think that at all, because I think today is the worst day of my life because tomorrow is going to be so much better. And today is amazing. So I'm not saying today's bad, but I know that there's always more in God. There's always deeper we can go.
The little girl named Shelley, who dreamed of a beautiful life, may have been shocked by the horrible chapter that occurred all those years ago, but she also couldn't have imagined the transformation that would follow.
Never in a million years would I have ever thought that I would be, a quote-unquote pastor's wife or a pastor myself. Yeah, that would have been the furthest thing from my mind. But, again, he can take anybody and do whatever he wants with them, and he did. He plucked us out of, the clay and just transformed us.
Free of shame and helping others to be free, the Sullivans can't wait to see what God has planned for them next. But in going public with their painful past, their prayer is that others in similar dark circumstances can find hope for change. In Mahone Bay, Nova Scotia, Cheryl Weber, 100 Huntley Street.